Minji Park wiped down the counter for the third time that hour. Her feet ached in her worn sneakers, and the afternoon sun streaming through the diner windows made the small restaurant feel like an oven. She glanced at the clock. 3 more hours until her shift ended. Then she had to rush across town for her evening cleaning job at the office building. It was the same routine every day. Wake up at 6, get her daughter Sua ready for school, work the morning shift at the diner, pick up Sua from school, drop her at their neighbor's apartment, then clean offices until midnight. Minji couldn't remember the last time she'd slept more than 5 hours, but she couldn't complain. The bills were paid barely. Sua had food to eat and clothes to wear. Even if they came from the donation center, they had a roof over their heads even if the apartment was so small that they shared a pull-out couch for a bed. Things could always be worse. Table 6 needs refills, her manager called from the kitchen. His name was Sung Ho, and he watched every move the servers made like a hawk watching mice. Minji grabbed the coffee pot and made her rounds. The diner was half empty, which was normal for a Thursday afternoon. Most of their customers came for breakfast or dinner. These quiet hours gave her time to think, which wasn't always a good thing. Thinking meant worrying about money, about Sua's upcoming school trip that they couldn't afford, about the strange noise their building's heater was making. She was refilling an elderly couple's water glasses when something outside caught her eye. A young boy stood on the sidewalk, pressed against the diner's window. His face was thin, and his eyes were fixed on the plates of food inside. He wasn't moving, just staring. Minji felt her heart squeeze. She knew that look. She'd seen it in the mirror during the first year after Sua's father left, when she'd skipped meals so her baby could eat. The boy shifted his weight, and that's when Minji noticed the metal brace on his left leg. He leaned on a simple wooden cane, the kind that looked too plain for a child. His clothes were clean but rumpled, like he'd been wearing them for a long time. "Minji, stop daydreaming and get back to work," Sung Ho snapped from behind the counter. She blinked and turned away from the window, but every few minutes her eyes drifted back to the boy. He was still there, still watching. Still hungry. An hour passed. The boy sat down on the curb, his cane resting against his good leg. He never looked away from the window. Minji couldn't take it anymore. During her break, she approached Sung Ho at the register. "I want to buy a meal," she said. "The chicken rice bowl with extra vegetables." Sung Ho raised an eyebrow. "For yourself? You usually bring food from home. For someone else?" His expression changed immediately. "No, absolutely not. I'm paying for it with my own money," Minji said quietly. "I don't care. This is the 3rd time this month you've tried to feed random people." Sung Ho crossed his arms. "This isn't a charity, Minji. If word gets out that we're giving away food, we'll have every homeless person in town lined up outside. He's a child. I don't care if he's the president's son." "The answer is no." Minji felt anger flash through her chest, but she kept her voice calm. She couldn't afford to lose this job. "I'm not asking the diner to pay. I'll buy it with my tips. My money, my choice." Sung Ho stared at her for a long moment. Then he shook his head. "Fine, but don't make a scene about it. And this is the last time, understand? Next time I'll write you up." Minji nodded quickly and paid for the meal from the small pile of bills in her apron pocket. It was nearly all the tips she'd earned that day. Tomorrow's bus fare would have to come from somewhere else. She'd figure it out later. She packed the food carefully in a container, adding extra rice and a carton of milk. When Sung Ho wasn't looking, she slipped in a piece of the day's leftover cake. The boy looked up as she pushed through the diner door. Up close, he looked about 10 years old, with serious dark eyes and hair that needed cutting. He tensed like he was ready to run. "Hi," Minji said gently. She knelt down so she wasn't towering over him. "I'm Minji. Are you hungry?" The boy glanced at the container in her hands. She could see him fighting between pride and need. "Need one?" "Yes, ma'am," he said softly. "Here." She held out the food. "It's still hot." He took it with both hands, careful not to drop it. "Thank you. But I don't have money to pay." "That's okay. It's already paid for." Minji smiled. "Do you have somewhere to sit?" "The bench across the street has shade." The boy shook his head. "I have to stay here. My father told me to wait right in this spot." Minji looked around. The street wasn't busy, but it wasn't safe to leave a child alone either. "How long have you been waiting?" "Since morning." He saw her expression and added quickly, He'll come back. He always does. We got separated at the market. That was hours ago. Minji felt worry creep up her spine. Do you have a phone? We could call him. He has our phone. I'm supposed to stay where he told me. The boy's voice was firm, like he'd been given strict instructions. Minji understood. Some parents taught their children to stay put if they got lost, rather than wander around looking. It was smart usually, but this many hours seemed wrong. Okay, she said. You eat that and I'll sit with you for a few minutes. Is that all right? The boy nodded. He opened the container and started eating slowly, carefully, like the food was precious. Minji noticed his hands were trembling slightly. What's your name? She asked. Jihoon. That's a nice name. How old are you, Jihoon? 10, almost 11. They sat in silence while he ate. Minji wanted to ask more questions, but something in the boy's quiet dignity stopped her. He wasn't looking for conversation. He was focused on the food and on watching the street for his father. When he finished, he carefully closed the empty container and held it out to her. Thank you, ma'am. This was very kind. The formal way he spoke surprised her. Most 10-year-olds she knew, including the kids in Suwa's class, were loud and casual. This boy spoke like a small adult. You're welcome. Minji pulled a napkin from her apron and wrote her phone number on it. Listen, if your father doesn't come back in the next hour, I want you to go into the diner and ask for me. They'll find me. Or call this number if you find a phone, okay? Jihoon took the napkin and folded it carefully into his pocket. Okay, but he'll come. He's just busy sometimes. Minji wanted to argue, wanted to take this boy to the police station or sit with him until his father appeared. But Sung-ho was already glaring at her through the window, tapping his watch. I have to go back to work, she said reluctantly. But I'll check on you, okay? And here. She pulled out the wrapped slice of cake from her apron. For later. Jihoon's eyes widened. Thank you. Minji stood up, her knees protesting. As she walked back to the diner, she looked back 3 times. Jihoon was still sitting there, the cake in his lap, watching the street. Inside, Sung-ho was waiting with his arms crossed. That better be the last time. It is, Minji lied. She already knew that if she saw another hungry child, she'd do the same thing again. The rest of her shift passed in a blur. She kept glancing out the window. Jihoon was still there at 4 o'clock. Still there at 5. Then just before 6 she looked out and he was gone. Relief flooded through her. His father must have finally come. She said a silent prayer that the boy was safe and headed home. What Minji didn't see was the black sedan parked across the street, or the man inside who had been watching everything. The man who had watched his son talk to a stranger for the first time in months. The man who had seen his son smile while eating food, bought by a woman who could barely afford her own meals. The man who was now holding the security footage from 3 different stores, all showing the same kind server with tired eyes who had stayed with his son when she should have been working. Jae-sung Choi sat in his car for a long time after Jihoon climbed inside. His son was quiet, like always, but there was something different in his eyes, something that had been missing for 2 years. Did you have a good meal? Jae-sung asked quietly. Yes, father. The lady was very nice. Jae-sung looked at the diner, then at his driver. Find out who she is. I want her full name and address by tomorrow morning. Yes, sir. As they drove away, Jae-sung made a decision. He'd been searching for months for something, anything that could reach his son. Money couldn't buy it. The best therapists in the country couldn't create it. But somehow a tired waitress with kind eyes had found it in 10 minutes. He would find her. And he would make sure she understood just how much that simple act of kindness was worth. Minji woke up to the sound of water running. She blinked at the ceiling, trying to remember where she was. The pull-out couch. Their apartment. Friday morning. Her phone alarm hadn't gone off yet, which meant Suwa was up early. Minji pushed herself upright, every muscle in her body protesting. The cleaning job had run late last night because someone had spilled something sticky all over the 4th-floor hallway. Mama, I'm already dressed, Suwa called from the tiny bathroom. Minji smiled despite her exhaustion. Her daughter was 8 years old and already more responsible than some adults she knew. Suwa had learned early that her mother worked hard, and she tried her best not to add to the burden. Good job, baby, Minji called back. She folded up the couch and pulled out their small table from against the wall. Breakfast was the same as always, rice, eggs, and kimchi. Simple, cheap filling. Suwa came out with her hair brushed and her school uniform neat. The uniform was getting too small, Minji noticed. The sleeves were too short and the skirt barely reached her knees. New clothes would have to wait until next month. Did you sleep okay? Suha asked, setting out 2 plates without being asked. Fine, baby. You? Yes, I finished my homework last night before you got home. Suha paused. Mama, next week is the field trip. To the science museum. Minji's hand tightened on the spatula. She'd been dreading this conversation. I know, baby. It costs 30,000 won, plus 10,000 for lunch. Suha's voice was carefully neutral. My teacher said if we can't afford it, she can talk to the principal about the scholarship fund. 40,000 won. That was 2 days of groceries, or the money she needed to save for their landlord's annual maintenance fee. Minji felt the familiar weight of failure settle on her shoulders. Let me think about it, she said quietly. Maybe we can work something out. It's okay if I can't go, Suha said quickly. Jiwon can't go either because her dad lost his job. We can study together instead. Minji turned to look at her daughter. Suha was smiling, but her eyes held a sadness that no 8-year-old should carry. The sight made Minji's chest hurt. We'll figure it out, Minji promised, though she had no idea how. They ate breakfast in comfortable silence. Suha chattered about her friends and her teacher and the story they were reading in class. Minji listened and smiled and tried to forget about money for a few minutes. Someone knocked on the door. Both of them looked up in surprise. Nobody visited them, ever. Their neighbors kept to themselves and Minji had no family in the city. Stay here, Minji said. She walked to the door and checked the peephole. A man in an expensive suit stood in their dingy hallway. He looked completely out of place, like a peacock in a chicken coop. Behind him stood a woman with perfect hair holding a tablet like a shield. Minji's first thought was that they were from the building management, here to raise the rent. Her second thought was that they were too well dressed for that. Her third thought was to not open the door. The man knocked again. Miss Park? Minji Park? I need to speak with you. It's about my son. His son? Minji didn't know anyone with a son. Unless... She opened the door a crack, keeping the chain lock on. Yes? The man smiled, but it looked nervous. My name is Jae-sung Choi. This is my assistant, Hae-won. I believe you met my son yesterday. Ji-hoon? The boy from the diner. Minji's confusion grew. Is he okay? Did something happen? No, he's fine. Better than fine, actually. May I come in? I promise this will only take a few minutes. Jae-sung's voice was polite, almost pleading. Minji glanced back at Suha, who was watching with wide eyes. Against her better judgment, she unhooked the chain and opened the door. Jae-sung and his assistant stepped inside. Minji immediately felt embarrassed about their small apartment. The walls needed painting. The floor had old stains. Their furniture was mismatched and worn. These people looked like they lived in a palace. Please sit, Minji said, gesturing to their 2 chairs. She and Suha would stand. Jae-sung sat down carefully. Up close, he looked tired despite his perfect suit. There were dark circles under his eyes and worry lines on his forehead. First, I want to apologize, he said. Yesterday was my fault. Ji-hoon and I were at the market, and I got an emergency call from work. I was distracted and we got separated. It took me hours to find him because he'd walked further than I expected. He said he was waiting where you told him. Minji said, yes, I'd taught him to stay put if we got separated. I just never thought. Jae-sung ran a hand through his hair. I'm sorry. I'm explaining this badly. The point is, when I finally found him, he told me about you. About the meal you bought him, the cake, how you sat with him. It was just food, Minji said, uncomfortable with the gratitude in his voice. It was more than that. Jae-sung leaned forward. Miss Park, my son has a medical condition. It's rare and it's progressive. He's been through multiple surgeries and years of physical therapy. 2 years ago, his mother passed away from the same condition. Minji felt her heart clench. I'm so sorry. Since then, Ji-hoon has been shut down. He doesn't talk much. He doesn't smile. He sees the best doctors, has the best care, lives in the best home. But none of it matters because he's not happy. He's just existing. Suha had moved closer to Minji, holding onto her mother's hand. Minji squeezed back gently. Yesterday was different, Jae-sung continued. I watched from my car. I saw you sit with him. I saw him talk to you. And I saw him smile, Miss Park. For the first time in 8 months, I saw my son smile. Minji didn't know what to say. The man's pain was visible in every word. The assistant, Hae-won, spoke for the first time. We reviewed security footage from the surrounding stores to find you. I hope that doesn't upset you. Mr. Choi was desperate to thank you personally. You didn't have to do that, Minji said. I'm glad Ji-hoon is okay. That's enough. No, it's not enough. Jae-sung's voice was firm now. Miss Park, I'd like to make you an offer. Please hear me out before you say no. Minji felt a warning tingle in her spine. This was going somewhere she didn't expect. I want to hire you, Jae-sung said, as a companion and caregiver for Ji-hoon. 6 months trial basis. Your salary would be 8 million won per month. The number hit Minji like a physical blow. 8 million won. She made barely 1 million won total from both her jobs combined. This was impossible. That's too much, she whispered. It's not. Not for what I'm asking. Jae-sung pulled out a folder from his briefcase and set it on the table. This contains all the details. The job would be flexible hours, mostly afternoons and weekends. You'd spend time with Ji-hoon. Talk with him, do activities, just be present. No medical care required. We have nurses for that. Just companionship. Minji stared at the folder like it might explode. Why me? You could hire anyone. A trained therapist. Someone with experience. Because you're the one he responded to. Jae-sung's voice cracked slightly. I've hired therapists, specialists, people with every certification imaginable. None of them could reach him. But you did, in 10 minutes, just by being kind. I have a daughter, Minji said, gesturing to Sua. I can't just abandon her. She would be welcome too, Haewon said quickly, making notes on her tablet. In fact, Mr. Choi thinks having another child around might be good for Ji-hoon. He's been isolated. This was insane. Minji looked at Sua, who was staring at the folder with wide eyes. 8 million won per month would change everything. Everything, but it felt wrong. Like taking advantage of someone's grief. I need to think about this, Minji said. This is too big to decide right now. Of course. Jae-sung stood up and Haewon followed. The folder has my contact information. Take all the time you need. But Miss Park, I'm not offering this lightly. My son has maybe 10 to 15 years left. His condition is degenerative. I want those years to be happy, not just comfortable. And somehow you have a gift for making him happy. The weight of those words settled over the small apartment. 10 to 15 years. A child with an expiration date. Minji walked them to the door. Before he left, Jae-sung turned back. One more thing. Everything I've told you about Ji-hoon's condition is in that folder, including medical reports. I'm trusting you with my son's story. Please keep it private. I will, Minji promised. After they left, Minji and Sua stood in silence for a long moment. Mama, Sua finally said. That was the boy from yesterday? Yes, he's sick? Yes, baby. Are you going to help him? Minji looked down at her daughter's face. Sua had always had a big heart, even when life gave her every reason to be bitter. I don't know, Minji admitted. This is complicated. You helped him yesterday. That was different. That was just a meal. But he needs help now too, and we need money. Sua's voice was practical, not greedy. Maybe it's okay to help each other. Minji picked up the folder with shaking hands. Inside was a contract, medical reports, and a business card with Jae-sung's personal number. She should say no. This was too much, too fast, too good to be true. Rich people didn't just show up and offer life-changing money to waitresses. There had to be a catch. But when she opened the medical reports and saw Ji-hoon's sweet face in the attached photo, she felt that same squeeze in her chest from yesterday. I'm going to call Aunt Haewon, Minji said. Don't you have school? Sua glanced at the clock and yelped. I'm going to be late. They rushed through the rest of the morning routine. Minji walked Sua to school, kissed her goodbye, and then immediately called her friend. Yiwon worked at the corner grocery store and was the only person Minji really trusted in this city. They'd been friends for 5 years, ever since Minji had moved here with baby Sua. You sound weird, Haewon said immediately. What happened? Minji told her everything. The boy, the meal, the billionaire father showing up at her door. Wait, Haewon interrupted. Jae-sung Choi? As in Choi Industries? I guess. I don't know anything about business. Minji, Choi Industries makes half the electronics in this country. They're huge. And if this is the same Choi family, his wife died a couple years ago. It was all over the news because she was some famous classical pianist. Minji's head spun. She'd been so focused on Ji-hoon's medical condition that she hadn't even thought to research the family. Look him up, Haewon urged. Make sure this is real. Then we'll talk about whether you should do it. Minji spent the next hour at the library using their public computer. Everything Jae-sung had said was true. Choi Industries was massive. Jae-sung was its CEO, worth more money than Minji could even imagine. His wife, So Young, had been a celebrated pianist who died at age 38 from a rare genetic disorder. She'd passed it to their son. There were photos of Ji-hoon from years ago before his mother died. He was smiling in those pictures, a normal, happy kid. Minji also found articles about the Choi family's charitable donations. Millions of won to medical research, scholarships for underprivileged students, support for single parents. This wasn't some cruel rich person looking for entertainment. This was a desperate father trying to save his son from a life of loneliness before time ran out. Minji called Haiwan back. They talked for an hour, going through every possible angle, the risks, the opportunities, what could go wrong, what could go right. The real question, Haiwan finally said, is what happens after 6 months? You'll be dependent on that income. Sua will be in a better school. You'll have savings. And then what if he decides you're not helping anymore? You'll be back where you started, except now you'll know what you're missing. That was the fear that kept circling in Minji's mind. This money could change their lives, but temporary wealth might be worse than never having it at all. Her phone rang. An unknown number. Miss Park? It was Jae-sung's voice. I apologize for calling so soon. I know you need time to think. But I wanted to ask one thing. Would you be willing to come to our home tomorrow? Just to see Ji-hoon again, talk with him. No commitment, just meet him properly. Minji closed her eyes. She should say no. She should run far away from this impossible situation. Okay, she heard herself say. Tomorrow. But just to talk. Thank you, Jae-sung said, and the relief in his voice was palpable. Thank you so much. After they hung up, Minji sat on a bench outside the library. She had just made a decision that would change everything one way or another. She just hoped it was the right one. Minji couldn't sleep that night. She lay on the pull-out couch next to Sua, staring at the ceiling and listening to the building's old pipes groan. Tomorrow she would visit the Choi estate. Tomorrow she would see Ji-hoon again. Tomorrow she might make a decision that would change their entire lives. The contract sat on the small table across the room. She'd read it 5 times. Everything seemed legitimate. The salary, the terms, the benefits. But something kept nagging at her. Why would someone so wealthy choose her? A waitress with no education beyond high school, no special skills, no experience with sick children. Unless it was some kind of trick. Unless rich people entertained themselves with poor people's hopes. No. That didn't match the broken father she'd seen in her apartment. Jae-sung's pain had been real. Beside her, Sua rolled over in her sleep. Her daughter's face was peaceful in the dim light from the street. Minji thought about all the things she couldn't give her. New clothes, school trips, music lessons, a room of her own, a future that didn't mean working 2 jobs just to survive. This job could change all of that. 8 million won per month for 6 months was 48 million won. Even after taxes and savings, that was enough to transform their lives. But then what? What happened when 6 months ended and she went back to being a waitress? How would Sua feel having tasted a better life only to lose it again? Minji turned on her side and closed her eyes. She'd think about it more in the morning. Morning came too fast. Sua had Saturday activities at school, a free program for students whose parents worked weekends. Minji dropped her off, then took 2 buses across the city to the address Jae-sung had given her. The neighborhood changed as the bus climbed into the hills. The buildings grew larger and further apart. Trees lined the streets. There were no convenience stores or laundromats here, just high walls and security gates. Minji got off at the stop Jae-sung had specified and stood looking up at a massive gate. Through the bars, she could see a long driveway curving up toward a house that looked more like a hotel. She'd known they were rich. But knowing and seeing were different things. A voice came from a speaker beside the gate. Miss Park? Yes, Minji said, her voice sounding small. Welcome. Please come through. The gate swung open silently. Minji walked up the driveway, her old shoes clicking on the perfect pavement. Gardens spread out on both sides, more beautiful than any park she'd ever visited. Someone had to maintain all of this. Probably several someones. The front door opened before she reached it. Jae-sung stepped out, wearing casual clothes that probably cost more than her monthly rent. He looked less polished than yesterday, more human. His hair was slightly messy and his eyes were tired. Miss Park, thank you for coming. He shook her hand warmly. Please come in. The inside of the house was overwhelming. High ceilings, marble floors, artwork on the walls. Everything was clean and beautiful and cold. It didn't feel like a place where a child lived. Ji-hoon is in his room, Jae-sung said, leading her through a hallway. He doesn't know you're coming. I thought it might be better as a surprise. They passed rooms that looked barely used. A formal dining room with a table that could seat 20. A living room with white furniture that seemed too perfect to actually sit on. Finally, they reached a door decorated with a small nameplate. Ji-hoon Jae-sung knocked softly and opened the door. The room was large, easily 3 times the size of Minji's entire apartment. One wall was all windows looking out over the garden. The other walls held shelves full of books and toys. Everything a child could want was in this room, but Ji-hoon sat alone in the corner reading a book. His leg brace was off, propped against the wall. He looked up when the door opened and his face transformed when he saw Minji, the lady from the diner. He said, his voice filling with something like joy. Hi, Ji-hoon, Minji said, smiling. Remember me? Minji. I remember. You gave me food and cake. He struggled to his feet, reaching for his brace. Are you visiting my father? Actually, I came to see you, Minji said. Is that okay? Ji-hoon nodded quickly. He looked at his father, then back at Minji. Really? Really? I thought maybe we could talk. Get to know each other better. Jae-sung cleared his throat. I'll leave you two alone. If you need anything, there's a staff member in the next room. Just press that button. He pointed to a panel on the wall. After he left, Minji sat down on the floor near Ji-hoon's corner. She didn't want to tower over him or force him to move from his comfortable spot. This is a nice room, she said. Ji-hoon shrugged. It's big. Do you like to read? Yes, books are good company. He said it matter-of-factly, like he'd accepted that books were better than people. What are you reading now? Ji-hoon showed her the cover. It was an adventure story about a boy exploring mysterious islands. My mom used to read to me. Now I read by myself. Your mom had good taste. I used to read stories like that when I was younger. Minji paused. I have a daughter. She's 8. She loves to read too. Interest sparked in Ji-hoon's eyes. You have a daughter? Yes, her name is Sua. She's at school right now, but maybe you could meet her sometime. Does she go to the international school? No, the public school near our apartment. Ji-hoon was quiet for a moment. I don't go to school anymore. I have tutors here. Minji heard the loneliness behind those words. Do you miss it? School? Sometimes. I miss having friends. He picked at the edge of his book. But I can't run around like other kids. And I get tired easily. It's better this way. Who told you that? Everyone. The doctors, my father, the tutors. They say I need to be careful with my energy. Save it for important things. Minji felt anger rise in her chest. She understood protecting a sick child. But this felt like they'd wrapped him in so much protection that he couldn't breathe. You know what I think? She said gently. I think living is the important thing. Using your energy to be happy, to do things you enjoy. That's not wasting it. Ji-hoon looked at her with those serious eyes. My mom said something like that once. Before she got really sick, they talked for 2 hours. Ji-hoon told her about his books, his physical therapy exercises, and the tutor who taught him mathematics. Minji told him about the ocean near their apartment, about Sua's adventures at school, about the small moments that made life good even when things were hard. She noticed how he lit up when discussing things outside his usual routine, how he asked questions about normal life like it was a foreign country, how he actually laughed when she told him about the time Sua tried to cook breakfast and accidentally made purple eggs. A soft knock interrupted them. A woman in a neat uniform entered with a tray. Lunchtime, Ji-hoon. The food was healthy and carefully portioned. Everything on the tray was beige or green, obviously chosen for nutrition rather than joy. Minji watched Ji-hoon eat dutifully, mechanically. This was a child who'd forgotten that food could be fun. After lunch, they drew pictures together. Then Ji-hoon had his physical therapy session. Minji watched from the doorway as a professional therapist put him through careful exercises. It looked painful and boring. That's enough for today, the therapist said after 30 minutes. Good work, Ji-hoon. Ji-hoon dressed again and returned to Minji. Sorry, I have to do that every day. Don't be sorry. You're working hard to stay strong. They talked some more. Minji told him stories about the ocean, describing the waves and the seabirds and the way the water changed colors with the weather. Ji-hoon listened like she was describing another planet. I haven't been to the ocean in 3 years, he said quietly. Father says it's too far and I might get hurt on the rocks. Minji made a mental note. If she took this job, they were going to the ocean. Eventually, Jae-sung returned. He looked hopeful and nervous all at once. How are you two doing? Good, Ji-hoon said. Minji told me about her daughter in the ocean and lots of things. That's wonderful. Jae-sung's voice was thick with emotion. Ji-hoon, why don't you read for a while? I need to talk with Miss Park. Minji said goodbye to Ji-hoon, promising to visit again soon. His face fell slightly like he was afraid she'd disappear forever. Jae-sung led her to a study down the hall. This room felt more lived in than the others, with papers on the desk and coffee mugs that hadn't been cleaned away immediately. Please, sit, he said, gesturing to a comfortable chair. Minji sat, suddenly nervous. This felt like a business meeting, which she supposed it was. Jae-sung sat across from her and leaned forward, his hands clasped. I watched on the security monitor, not to spy, but because I wanted to see how Ji-hoon responded to you. Miss Park, in 2 hours you brought more life to my son than I've seen in 8 months. You made him laugh. You made him talk about dreams and possibilities. He's a good kid, Minji said. He's just lonely. Yes, and that's my fault. Jae-sung's voice cracked. After So Young died, I threw myself into protecting him. The best doctors, the best care, the safest environment. But I forgot that he's still a child who needs more than safety. He needs joy. Minji waited, sensing there was more. My wife had the same condition Ji-hoon has, Jae-sung continued. We knew she'd pass it to our children if we had any. But she wanted a family so badly. She said that a short, happy life was better than a long, empty one. He wiped his eyes roughly. She was right. But after she died, I got scared. I couldn't lose Ji-hoon too. So I've kept him in this bubble, this perfect, safe bubble, where nothing can hurt him. But nothing can make him happy either, Minji said softly. Exactly. Jae-sung looked at her directly. You asked yesterday why I chose you. Here's the truth. Ji-hoon has had the best therapists, caregivers, tutors money can buy. They're all trained professionals who follow protocols and maintain appropriate boundaries, and they're all useless at making him happy. He stood up and walked to the window. You, Miss Park, are none of those things. You're not a trained therapist. You don't have certifications or degrees. What you have is something none of them possess. Genuine warmth, real kindness, the ability to see my son as a child instead of a patient. Minji felt tears prick her eyes, but I don't know how to handle his medical needs. What if something happens and I don't know what to do? We have medical staff for that. They're here 24 hours a day. Your job isn't to manage his condition. It's to help him live despite his condition. Jae-sung turned back to her. I'm not asking you to cure him or save him. I'm asking you to help him be happy for whatever time he has left. The weight of that request settled over Minji like a heavy blanket. This wasn't just a job. This was a dying child's last chance at a normal childhood. I need to be honest with you, Minji said. I'm scared. This kind of money would change my life and my daughter's life. But what happens after 6 months? If it doesn't work out or if you decide you don't need me anymore, I'll have gotten used to security I don't have. That could be worse than never having it. I understand that fear. Jae-sung returned to his chair. Let me make you a better offer. The contract will include a trust fund, 50 million won, set aside in your name regardless of how the 6 months go. If you complete the full 6 months, it's yours. If you have to leave early for any reason except abandonment, you still get a prorated amount. The salary is separate. Minji's head spun. 50 million won. That was enough to buy a small apartment, to secure Sua's education through university. And if the 6 months go well, Jae-sung continued, the position becomes permanent with yearly contract renewals. I can't promise forever because I don't know what Ji-hoon's condition will do, but I can promise that as long as you're helping him, you'll have financial security. He pulled out a new contract, thicker than the first one. I also added provisions for Sua, private school tuition paid fully, health care for both of you, the same plan my family uses, and she's welcome here anytime. Ji-hoon needs to be around children his age. This was too much. It had to be too much. Why are you doing all this? Minji asked. Truly. Jae-sung was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. Because I failed my wife. She wanted Ji-hoon to have a full life, whatever time he had. After she died, I was so consumed by grief and fear that I forgot her wishes. I turned our son's life into a waiting room, and now time is running out and I'm desperate to fix what I've broken. He looked at Minji with raw honesty. You showed my son more genuine care in 10 minutes than most people show in a lifetime. You gave him food when you could barely afford it yourself. You sat with him when you should have been working. You treated him like a child worth caring about, not a sick kid worth pitying. That's what I need for him. Not pity, not professional distance, just human warmth. Minji thought about Ji-hoon sitting alone in that giant room, surrounded by expensive things but starving for connection. She thought about Suwa, who deserved more than a life of just getting by. She thought about herself, exhausted and aching, wondering how many more years she could work 2 jobs before her body gave out. And she thought about Ji-hoon's smile when he saw her today, real and bright and full of hope. I want to talk to my daughter first, Minji said. This affects her too, and I want to bring her to meet Ji-hoon before I decide. If they don't get along, this won't work. Of course. Jae-sung looked relieved that she hadn't said no immediately. Tomorrow, Sunday? You could come for lunch, stay the afternoon. Okay, tomorrow. Minji stood up and Jae-sung walked her to the door. A driver was waiting to take her back to her neighborhood. She'd insisted she could take the bus, but Jae-sung had been firm about this small courtesy. During the ride home, Minji stared out the window and tried to process everything. 6 months ago, her biggest worry was whether she could afford Sua's school supplies. Now she was considering a job that would pay more in 1 month than she currently made in a year. It felt surreal. Like someone else's life. The car dropped her near her building. Minji climbed the stairs slowly, her mind racing. She picked up Sua from the neighbor's apartment and they made dinner together, simple and familiar. After they ate, Minji pulled out the new contract and explained everything to her daughter. The job, the money, the sick boy who needed a friend. Sua listened carefully, her young face serious. Is the boy nice? Yes, very nice. Lonely, but nice. And we'd have enough money for everything. Yes, baby. More than enough. Sua was quiet for a long moment, thinking. Then she asked the question Minji had been avoiding. What happens if he dies while you're working there? Minji's breath caught. Leave it to a child to ask the hard question directly. I don't know, she admitted. That would be very sad. But you'd still have helped him be happy first, right? Yes. Then I think you should do it, Sua said simply. Even if it's scary. Even if it ends. Because he needs help now and we need help now. And maybe that's okay. Minji pulled her daughter into a hug, amazed once again by how wise this little person had become. That night she wrote a text to Jae-sung. We'll come tomorrow at noon. But I'm bringing Sua to meet Ji-hoon. If this is going to work, they need to like each other. His response came immediately. Perfect. Thank you for giving us this chance. Minji put her phone down and looked at Sua, already asleep beside her. Tomorrow would decide everything. She just hoped she was making the right choice. Sunday morning arrived bright and cold. Minji woke early despite barely sleeping, her mind spinning with worry. She'd already changed her outfit 3 times, trying to find something that didn't look too poor but wasn't trying too hard. Finally, she settled on her best jeans and a simple sweater. Sua was surprisingly calm about the whole thing. She dressed in her school uniform since it was the nicest thing she owned, and braided her own hair while Minji made breakfast. Are you nervous? Minji asked. A little, Sua admitted. But mostly I'm curious. You said he has lots of books? More books than I've ever seen in one room. Then we'll probably be friends. Minji wished she had her daughter's simple confidence. At 8 years old, Sua still believed the world could be kind if you were kind back. They took 2 buses to reach the neighborhood. Minji had refused Jae-sung's offer to send a car, wanting to arrive on her own terms. But as they walked up the hill toward the estate, she started to regret that decision. Her feet hurt and Sua was breathing hard from the climb. Wow, Sua whispered when the gate came into view. Mama, this is where he lives? Yes, baby. It looks like a castle. The gate opened before they reached it, and this time a young woman in a neat uniform stood waiting. Miss Park, I'm Da-yoon, one of the house staff. Please follow me. They walked up the driveway and Minji watched Sua's eyes grow wider with each step. The gardens, the fountain, the house itself rising up like something from a movie. Minji squeezed her daughter's hand, reminding both of them that they belonged here at least for today. Jae-sung met them at the door himself. He dressed casually again, clearly trying not to be intimidating. When he saw Sua, he knelt down to her level. "You must be Sua," he said warmly. "Your mother has told Ji-hoon all about you. He's very excited to meet you." Sua, usually shy with strangers, looked him in the eye. "Is he really sick?" "Sua," Minji said quickly, embarrassed. But Jae-sung just nodded seriously. "Yes, he is. He has a condition that makes his muscles weak. That's why he uses a cane and sometimes a wheelchair. But his mind is perfectly healthy and his heart is brave. He just needs friends who can see past the medical equipment." "Okay," Sua said simply. "Can I meet him now?" Jae-sung smiled and Minji saw relief in his eyes. "Of course. Follow me." He led them through the house, and this time Minji noticed more details. Family photos on the walls showing happier times. A woman's touch in the decorations, probably Ji-hoon's mother before she got too sick. Signs that this had once been a home full of life. They reached Ji-hoon's room and Jae-sung knocked softly before opening the door. Ji-hoon was sitting by the window, his leg brace on today. He looked up and saw Minji first, his face brightening. Then he saw Sua and something like nervousness crossed his features. "Hi, Ji-hoon," Minji said. "This is my daughter, Sua. Sua, this is my friend Ji-hoon." "Hi," Sua said. She walked right up to him, completely unafraid. "Your room is really big. Do you have a favorite book I could read?" Ji-hoon blinked, clearly not expecting such a direct approach. Yes. Do you like adventure stories?" "I love them. Mama reads to me every night, but I can read by myself too." "Me too." Ji-hoon stood up carefully, leaning on his cane. "I have a whole shelf of adventure books. Come see." And just like that, the ice was broken. The two children walked to his bookshelf, and Sua started asking questions about every title. Ji-hoon answered carefully at first, then with growing enthusiasm. Minji and Jae-sung stood back watching. "She's wonderful," Jae-sung said quietly. "So natural with him." She doesn't see the cane, Minji realized. She just sees another kid who likes books. They left the children alone and walked to the study. Jae-sung poured tea and they sat in comfortable chairs by the window. "I want to be completely honest with you," Jae-sung said. "This won't be easy. My family, especially my sister, will have opinions about you. Some of my business associates will think I'm making a mistake. And Ji-hoon himself might have hard days where nothing helps." "I appreciate the honesty," Minji said. "But I also want you to know what resources you'll have. Medical staff on call always. A driver whenever you need transport. This house has everything, including a library, a small gym, a pool that's heated year-round. You and Sua are welcome to use any of it." He pulled out a tablet and showed her Ji-hoon's daily schedule. Physical therapy, tutoring, meals, medication times. Everything was regimented, controlled, planned. "This is his current routine," Jae-sung said. "But I want you to change it. Make it better. Make it feel less like a hospital schedule and more like a childhood." Minji studied the schedule. "He has tutoring 4 hours a day?" "Yes, he's very advanced in most subjects." "What about playtime?" "Free time?" The doctors recommended structure to conserve his energy. Minji looked up at him. "With respect, the doctors are wrong. He's 10 years old. He needs time to just be a kid." Jae-sung was quiet for a moment. So Young said the same thing once. I didn't listen then. I'd like to listen now. They talked for an hour about what Minji's role would look like. Not a tutor, not a nurse, not a maid. A companion. Someone to remind Ji-hoon that life could still be fun even with limitations. "What about weekends?" Minji asked. "And holidays?" "Whatever schedule works for you. I know you'll still need your own life, your own time with Sua. We'll work it out week by week." They discussed practical details until lunchtime. Then they went to collect the children. Ji-hoon's room had transformed. Books were spread everywhere. The two children sat on the floor, drawing pictures to illustrate the story they'd been reading. Ji-hoon was laughing at something Sua had drawn. A genuine full laugh that made him look like the child in the old photographs. "Having fun?" Jae-sung asked. "Yes," Ji-hoon said immediately. "Sua is funny. She draws dragons that look like fat cats." "They're chubby dragons," Sua corrected with dignity. "They ate too many princesses." Lunch was served in a smaller dining room, more casual than the formal one. The cook had prepared food that children actually enjoyed. Rice balls shaped like animals, colorful vegetables, and fruit cut into stars. Minji noticed how different Ji-hoon's eating was with Sua there. He actually seemed to taste his food, commenting on flavors and textures. Sua chattered about school and their neighborhood. and Ji-hoon listened with fascination, asking questions about things most rich kids took for granted. You ride the bus by yourself? He asked Sua. Sometimes if Mama is working. It's easy once you know the routes. I've never been on a bus, Ji-hoon admitted. Sua looked genuinely shocked. Never, but buses go everywhere. I know. Father says it's not safe for me because of my leg. People might bump into me. Minji and Jae-sung exchanged glances. Maybe we could try sometime, Minji suggested carefully. With planning and the right timing, it could work. Jae-sung looked uncomfortable but didn't disagree. After lunch, Da-eun appeared. Time for physical therapy, Ji-hoon. Ji-hoon's whole body slumped. Do I have to today? We have guests. The routine is important, Da-eun said gently but firmly. Can Sua come watch? Ji-hoon asked. I don't think that's appropriate, Da-eun started to say. Why not? Sua asked. I want to see. Jae-sung made a decision. It's fine. If Ji-hoon doesn't mind, Sua can observe. The physical therapy room was on the first floor, filled with equipment and mats. A professional therapist named Young-soo was waiting. He was kind but clinical, treating Ji-hoon like a patient rather than a person. For 30 minutes, Minji and Sua watched as Young-soo put Ji-hoon through exercises. Stretches that clearly hurt. Strength training that exhausted him. Balance work that was frustrating and slow. Ji-hoon's face was set and determined, but there was no joy in any of it. Just grim endurance. When it was over, Ji-hoon was sweating and tired. He dressed slowly, his hands shaking slightly from exertion. You did good, Young-soo said professionally. Same time tomorrow. After Young-soo left, Sua walked up to Ji-hoon. That looked hard. It is, Ji-hoon admitted. But I have to do it every day or I get weaker. My mama does exercises too, Sua said. But she plays music and sometimes dances while doing them. It looks more fun. Ji-hoon glanced at Minji. Really? It's true, Minji said. Exercise doesn't have to be so serious. Sometimes music helps. Something flickered in Ji-hoon's eyes. Not quite hope, but curiosity. They spent the rest of the afternoon in the garden. It was cool but sunny, and Jae-sung had staff bring out blankets and warm drinks. The garden had paths that were flat and smooth, perfect for Ji-hoon's cane. Sua ran ahead, exploring, while Ji-hoon walked slowly behind. Minji and Jae-sung followed at a distance. Look, Sua called. A pond with fish. Ji-hoon made his way over and the two children knelt by the water's edge. An older man in gardening clothes was nearby, tending to plants. Are you the gardener? Sua asked him directly. The man smiled. I am. My name is Jin-ho. These fish are beautiful. What kind are they? Jin-ho started explaining about koi fish and both children listened with interest. Ji-hoon asked intelligent questions and Jin-ho answered with respect, not talking down to him. Minji realized this was one of the first times she'd seen Ji-hoon interact with staff naturally. Usually there seemed to be an invisible wall between him and the people who worked in the house. But with Jin-ho, talking about something the gardener clearly loved, Ji-hoon relaxed. He laughed when one particularly large koi splashed water at them. He asked if he could help feed them sometime. Anytime you want, young sir, Jin-ho said. I'm here every day. As they walked back toward the house, Jae-sung spoke quietly to Minji. I've been watching something today. What? Everyone in this house treats Ji-hoon carefully. Politely, professionally. But you and Sua treat him like he's just a regular kid. Even Jin-ho seemed different with Sua there. Less formal. Maybe that's what he needs, Minji said. Not careful handling. Just normal interaction. That's what So Young wanted, she always said. He stopped, his voice catching. She said we should raise him like any other child, not like a fragile treasure. After she died, I forgot how to do that. They reached a bench and sat while the children explored more of the garden. When So Young was dying, Jae-sung continued. She made me promise something, she said. Don't let our son's life become about dying. Let it be about living. I promised her. But I failed. You didn't fail, Minji said gently. You were grieving and scared. That's human. Maybe. But it's been 2 years and Ji-hoon has been locked in this beautiful cage. He watched his son trying to keep up with Sua, determination on his face despite his tired legs. Today is the first time in months I've seen Him actually try to do something because he wants to, not because someone told him he should. Minji understood what he was really asking. I'll take the job. Jae-sung turned to her, hope and relief warring on his face. You will? Yes. On 3 conditions. Minji took a breath. First, I need some flexibility with the schedule. Some days I'll be here more, some days less, but it averages out. Second, Sua comes with me whenever possible. And third, you have to trust me to make judgment calls. If I think something is good for Ji-hoon, even if it seems risky, you have to let me try. Agreed, Jae-sung said immediately. All 3 conditions. When can you start? I need to give notice at my jobs, 2 weeks. I'll pay you for those 2 weeks as if you're already working, and I'll cover any lost wages from leaving early if needed. They shook hands formally, sealing the agreement. Minji felt like she was stepping off a cliff, hoping she could fly. They called the children back and had an early dinner together. Jae-sung told Ji-hoon that Minji would be coming to spend time with him regularly, that Sua would visit often, that things were going to change a bit. Ji-hoon looked at Minji with those serious eyes. You're really coming back? I promise, Minji said, multiple times a week. We're going to have adventures. What kind of adventures? All kinds. Reading adventures, garden adventures, maybe even ocean adventures. The ocean? Ji-hoon's eyes went wide. If your father agrees and we plan it carefully, yes. The ocean? Ji-hoon looked at his father with more hope than Jae-sung had seen in years. Can we, father? Jae-sung met Minji's eyes, and she saw him make a choice. To trust, to let go, to let his son live. Yes, Jae-sung said. We can. When it was time to leave, Ji-hoon walked them to the door himself, not wanting to say goodbye. Sua hugged him naturally, like they'd been friends forever. See you soon, Sua promised. Soon, Ji-hoon echoed. The driver took them home, and during the ride, Sua fell asleep against Minji's shoulder. Minji looked out at the city passing by, thinking about how much had changed in just 3 days. 3 days ago, she'd bought a meal for a hungry child without thinking twice. Now, she was about to change the entire course of her life. When they got home, Minji tucked Sua into bed and then sat at their small table with the contract. She read through it one more time, making sure she understood every word. Then she signed it. The next morning, she gave notice at both jobs. Sung-ho at the diner was annoyed but not surprised. The cleaning company supervisor was more understanding, wishing her luck. 2 weeks to transition. 2 weeks until her new life began. Minji spent those weeks preparing. She researched child development and activities for kids with physical limitations. She made lists of places to take Ji-hoon that were accessible, but still fun. She talked to Sua about what this change would mean for them. She also visited the estate twice more, getting to know the staff and Ji-hoon's routines better. She met the cook, the gardener, the medical staff, learning everyone's roles. Some of them were friendly. Others were cautious, uncertain about this new person entering their careful system. On her last day at the diner, an older regular customer asked where she was going. A new job, Minji said simply. Working with a child. You'll be good at that, the woman said. You've always been kind. As Minji walked home that night, she thought about those words. Kindness. Such a simple thing, really. But somehow, it had become the foundation for everything that was about to happen. She just hoped it would be enough. Tomorrow, her new life began. Minji's first official day started with uncertainty. She stood outside the Choi estate at 8 in the morning, wearing clothes that felt too casual for such a grand place. But Jae-sung had insisted she dress comfortably, that this wasn't a formal position. Tae-yoon greeted her at the door with a warm smile. Welcome, Miss Park. Mr. Choi is in a meeting, but he left instructions. I'll show you to your workspace. Workspace turned out to be a small room near Ji-hoon's quarters. It had a desk, comfortable, chairs, shelves for books and supplies, and large windows overlooking the garden. Someone had put fresh flowers on the desk. This is lovely, Minji said, genuinely touched. Mr. Choi wanted you to have your own space. The staff room is down the hall if you need anything. Kitchen privileges for snacks and meals. And here's a phone that connects directly to the medical staff security and Mr. Choi's office. Da-yoon handed her a small device. Any questions? When does Ji-hoon usually wake up? Around 7. He's already had breakfast and his morning medication. Usually tutoring starts at 8:30. Not today, Minji said firmly. Today we're doing something different. She found Ji-hoon in his room, already dressed and sitting at his desk with textbooks open. He looked up when she knocked, and his face transformed with joy. You came, he said, as if he'd been worried she wouldn't. I promised, didn't I? Minji walked in and looked at the textbooks. Advanced mathematics. Is this what you normally do in the morning? Yes. Mathematics from 8:30 to 10, then literature until lunch. Do you like mathematics? Ji-hoon shrugged. It's okay, I'm good at it. That's not what I asked. Do you like it? He was quiet for a moment and Minji saw him struggle with honesty. Not really, it's just what I'm supposed to do. Well, today we're taking a break from supposed to. Today we're going to the garden, but tutoring can wait, come on. They went to the garden and Minji had Ji-hoon show her everything Jin-ho had taught him about the plants. Then they sat by the koi pond and she pulled out a notebook. We're going to make a list, she said. Everything you want to do but haven't been allowed to or haven't had the chance to. No limits, even if it seems impossible. Ji-hoon looked uncertain. Like what? Like anything. What do you dream about doing? Slowly, carefully, Ji-hoon started talking. He wanted to go to the ocean. He wanted to eat cotton candy at a festival. He wanted to ride a train. He wanted to visit a bookstore and choose his own books. He wanted to make a friend his own age who wasn't tutored to be nice to him. Minji wrote everything down, her heart breaking with each simple wish. These were normal childhood experiences that had been denied to him. We'll do all of these, she promised. Some will take planning, but we'll do them. Really? Really. That first week established a new pattern. Mornings were for activities that got them moving, but weren't formal therapy. Garden walks, simple games, drawing and storytelling. Minji noticed that Ji-hoon's physical stamina actually improved when he was having fun instead of just exercising. Afternoons included some tutoring, but Minji sat in on the sessions and made them more interactive. Instead of just solving math problems, they calculated how many flowers were in sections of the garden. Literature became reading aloud and acting out scenes. The tutors were skeptical at first, but even they had to admit Ji-hoon was more engaged. Sua came 3 afternoons a week after school. Jae-sung sent his driver to pick her up, which made Minji uncomfortable at first, but Sua loved the adventure of it. When both children were together, the whole house felt different. There was laughter, noise, life. The second week, Minji implemented music during physical therapy. Young-soo, the therapist, was resistant. This is a medical procedure, not a dance class, he said. It's exercise, Minji countered. And music can make it more bearable. I'm the trained professional here, and I'm the one hired to improve his quality of life. Let's try it my way once. If it doesn't work, we'll go back to yours. Young-soo agreed reluctantly. Minji played upbeat music during the session, and she and Sua demonstrated the exercises alongside Ji-hoon, turning it into a group activity rather than a medical treatment. Ji-hoon completed the full session without complaint and actually asked to do extra stretches. Young-soo had to admit it worked better. By the third week, word had gotten around about the changes at the Choi estate, and not everyone was happy. Minji was in the garden with both children when a sleek car pulled up. A woman in her late 30s stepped out, dressed in designer clothes with perfect hair and makeup. She looked around the garden with disapproval. Where is my brother? She demanded of Da-yoon, who'd come out to greet her. In his office, Mrs. Kang. Shall I announce you? No need. I'll find him myself. The woman's eyes landed on Minji and the children. Who are you? Minji stood up, instinctively moving slightly in front of the kids. I'm Minji Park. I work with Ji-hoon. Ah, the new project. The woman's voice was cold. I'm Young-hee, Ji-hoon's aunt. We need to talk, Aunt Young-hee. Ji-hoon called out, but there was no warmth in his voice. More like resignation. Young-hee walked over and looked down at her nephew. Ji-hoon, you look disheveled. Is this woman not ensuring you maintain proper appearance? We were playing, Ji-hoon said quietly. Playing. Young-hee said the word like it was foreign. I see, she turned back to Min-ji. Come, we need to speak privately. Min-ji didn't want to leave the children, but she nodded to Sua, who immediately understood. We'll keep exploring, Sua said brightly. Min-ji followed Young-hee into the house. They went to a sitting room and Young-hee closed the door firmly. I'll be direct, Young-hee said. I don't know who you are or what your game is, but I won't let you take advantage of my brother's grief. I'm not. He's vulnerable right now, desperate to help Ji-hoon, and you saw an opportunity. A poor woman with a child, no prospects, suddenly getting access to one of the wealthiest families in the country. Min-ji felt anger rise but kept her voice calm. That's not what this is, isn't it? You feed his son one meal and suddenly you're living here making changes, getting paid more money than you've probably seen in your entire life. Young-hee crossed her arms. I've seen it before. Women who target widowers with money. I'm not targeting anyone. Your brother hired me to help Ji-hoon be happy. My nephew doesn't need happiness. He needs proper medical care and education. He needs structure and safety. What you're doing, letting him run around playing, ignoring his limitations, is dangerous and irresponsible. He has medical care, the best available. What he didn't have was a childhood. Young-hee's eyes narrowed. You don't get to decide what he needs. You're not family. You're not a doctor. You're just a waitress who got lucky. The word stung, but Min-ji refused to flinch. You're right. I'm not family and I'm not a doctor. But I'm someone who sees Ji-hoon as a person, not a patient. And your brother hired me because that's exactly what Ji-hoon needs. My brother is making a mistake, and when he realizes it, you'll be gone. So don't get too comfortable. Young-hee left without another word, her heels clicking sharply on the marble floor. Min-ji stood alone in the sitting room, shaking slightly. She'd known there would be opposition, but facing it directly was harder than she'd expected. That evening, Jae-sung called her into his study. My sister visited today, he said without preamble. Yes. She called me afterward, told me I was being foolish, that you were taking advantage, that I should fire you immediately. Jae-sung looked tired. This isn't the first conversation like this I've had. Some of my business partners have expressed similar concerns. Min-ji felt her stomach drop. Are you going to fire me? No. Jae-sung's voice was firm. But I wanted you to know what you're facing. My family and social circle are protective and suspicious. They think I'm being manipulated. Some of them think you're trying to replace So Young. I would never, I know. But they don't know you. They just see someone from outside our world suddenly having access to my son and my home. He leaned forward. I'm telling you this because it's going to get harder before it gets easier. There will be more confrontations. More judgment. Can you handle that? Min-ji thought about Ji-hoon's smile. About the list of dreams in her notebook. About Sua making her first real friend. Yes, she said. As long as you trust me, I can handle it. I do trust you. And more importantly, Ji-hoon trusts you. The fourth week brought the first real test of that trust. It was a regular Tuesday afternoon. Min-ji and Ji-hoon were in the library reading together, when Ji-hoon suddenly went pale. He tried to stand up and collapsed. Min-ji's heart stopped. She pressed the emergency button on her phone while kneeling beside him. Ji-hoon, can you hear me? He nodded weakly, his breathing shallow. The medical staff arrived within minutes. The nurse Soo-jin checked Ji-hoon's vital signs quickly and efficiently. Severe muscle spasm, she determined, possibly brought on by overexertion. When was his last therapy session? This morning, Min-ji said, her voice shaking. We did the usual routine. Did you add anything extra? Min-ji remembered. They'd walked to the far end of the garden to see the new flowers Jin-ho had planted. Further than usual. We walked more than normal, she admitted. Soo-jin's expression was neutral, but Min-ji saw the judgment. He needs rest. I'll administer medication and monitor him. Jae-sung arrived home early, summoned by the staff. He found Min-ji sitting outside Ji-hoon's room, her head in her hands. It's my fault, she said before he could speak. I pushed him too hard. I wasn't paying attention to his limits. Jae-sung sat beside her. Is he okay? Yes, Soo-jin says he'll be fine by tomorrow. But I should have been more careful. They sat in silence for a moment. Min-ji waited for him to say she was fired, that Young-hee had been right, that she wasn't qualified for this. Instead, Jae-sung said, So Young had episodes like this too. Especially in the beginning, when she was still trying to do everything she'd always done. She'd push herself and her body would rebel. I'm sorry, Minji whispered. Don't be. The difference was So Young was choosing to push herself. She said those moments of living fully were worth the episodes, and I think Ji-hoon would say the same. But you're going to make mistakes? This is unpredictable. But the alternative is keeping him in a bubble where nothing happens, good or bad. So Young wouldn't have wanted that. And neither do I. Minji felt tears slip down her cheeks. What if something worse happens? Then we'll handle it together. Jae-sung put a hand on her shoulder. You're not alone in this, Minji. You have me, the medical staff, everyone here. We're all learning. Ji-hoon was back to normal the next day, and the first thing he said to Minji was, Can we go see the new flowers again? Maybe we'll take the wheelchair this time, Minji suggested. Okay, but we're still going, right? Yes, we're still going. The incident did have one positive effect. Soo-jin and the other medical staff started working with Minji more closely, teaching her to recognize warning signs and understand Ji-hoon's limits better. They began to see her not as an intruder, but as part of the care team. By the end of the first month, life had settled into a rhythm. Ji-hoon was more active, more engaged, more alive than he'd been in years. He was also having some harder days physically, but even the medical staff agreed the trade-off was worth it. Sua started second grade at her new private school. Minji had been nervous about the change, worried that wealthy kids would be cruel to her daughter. But Sua made friends easily, her natural kindness and confidence winning people over. One Saturday, Jae-sung suggested they all go somewhere together. Not the estate, not the garden, but out into the world. Where? Minji asked. The aquarium. It's accessible, climate-controlled, and Ji-hoon has always wanted to see the ocean exhibits. Yes. Ji-hoon practically shouted. They went as a group. Jae-sung, Ji-hoon, Minji, and Sua. The driver took them in a vehicle modified for Ji-hoon's wheelchair, though he insisted on using his cane for most of the visit. At the aquarium, Minji watched Jae-sung watch his son. Ji-hoon pressed his face against the glass tanks, asking a million questions. Sua held his hand when the crowds got thick, making sure no one bumped into him. They looked like a family. An unusual family, but a family nonetheless. In the gift shop, Ji-hoon wanted a stuffed dolphin. It was small and cheap compared to the expensive toys he had at home, but he held it like it was precious. Can I get it, father? Of course. Jae-sung bought it without hesitation. On the drive home, both children fell asleep in the back seat, Ji-hoon still clutching his dolphin. Minji and Jae-sung sat in comfortable silence. Thank you, Jae-sung said quietly. For what? For reminding me what matters. For showing Ji-hoon that life still holds joy. For being exactly what we needed. Minji looked out the window at the city passing by. I'm just doing my best. Your best is extraordinary. That night, after dropping them at their apartment, Minji and Sua made dinner together. Their small home felt even smaller after spending the day in luxury, but it also felt like theirs in a way the estate never would. Mama, Sua said while washing dishes. Ji-hoon's uncle was there today at the aquarium. Watching us, Minji paused. What? A man? He was following us, but trying not to be seen. He had a camera with a big lens. Minji's stomach turned. Had Young-hee hired someone to watch them? To gather evidence of some wrongdoing? She made a note to tell Jae-sung in the morning. But that night she also allowed herself to feel something she'd been afraid to feel. Hope. Hope that maybe this impossible situation was actually working. Hope that she was truly helping. Hope that Sua's simple wisdom had been right all along. Sometimes people needed each other, and that was okay. Even across vast differences in wealth and circumstance, human connection could bridge the gap. She just hoped that connection would be strong enough to weather whatever challenges came next, because she had a feeling they were just getting started. 3 months had passed since Minji started working for the Choi family. 3 months that felt like a lifetime of change. She stood in her new apartment, still marveling at the space. 2 bedrooms, a real kitchen, a bathroom that didn't have mold in the corners. Jae-sung had insisted on covering moving costs and the security deposit when their old landlord raised the rent beyond what was reasonable. Minji had protested, but he'd been firm. You can't do your job if you're exhausted from a terrible living situation, he'd said simply. Sua had her own room now, a small desk for homework, a proper bed instead of a pull-out couch. The joy on her daughter's face had made Minji cry for an hour after Sua fell asleep that first night. But it wasn't just the apartment that had changed. Everything had shifted. Ji-hoon was different. Not cured, his condition would never allow that, but transformed. He smiled regularly now. They talked about the future, making plans for next month, next year. He'd started physical therapy with genuine effort instead of grim resignation. The list of dreams in Minji's notebook was slowly being checked off. They'd been to the ocean 3 times, carefully planned trips where Ji-hoon could sit on the sand and feel the waves. They'd visited a bookstore where he chose his own books for the first time. They'd eaten cotton candy at a small festival, Ji-hoon's face sticky and happy. Sua and Ji-hoon had become genuine friends. They video called most evenings, talking about books and games and nothing in particular. They had inside jokes. They argued sometimes like real siblings, then made up. Even the staff at the estate had warmed to Minji. Jin-ho taught her about gardening. The cook, Myung-hee, shared recipes. Taeyoon had become something close to a friend, often joining them for tea after the children went to bed. But not everything was easy. Young-hee continued her campaign against Minji. She visited regularly, always with cutting comments or thinly veiled accusations. She'd started bringing other family members, showing them the situation at the estate, building her case. And there was the photographer Sua had spotted. He'd appeared several more times, always at a distance, always with a camera. Jae-sung had hired security to identify him. They discovered Young-hee had indeed hired a private investigator, looking for any evidence of impropriety. The investigator found nothing because there was nothing to find. But the surveillance made Minji constantly aware that she was being watched, judged, evaluated. She'd also started noticing things at the estate. How Jae-sung worked too much, stayed in his office until late, rarely took time for himself. How he looked at her sometimes with an expression she couldn't quite read. How the household staff had started treating her less like an employee and more like family. It made her uncomfortable. She knew her place. She was hired help, no matter how much they cared for each other. Crossing that line would be dangerous for everyone. One Tuesday morning, Minji arrived at the estate to find chaos. Jae-sung was on the phone in his study, his voice sharp with stress. Medical staff rushed past her in the hallway. Her heart seized with fear. What happened? She asked Da-eun. Ji-hoon had a severe episode last night. They thought they'd have to hospitalize him, but Soo-jin managed to stabilize him here. Minji ran to Ji-hoon's room. He was in bed looking pale and small, oxygen tubes in his nose. Soo-jin sat beside him monitoring equipment. "Can I come in?" Minji asked quietly. Soo-jin nodded. "He's been asking for you." Minji sat carefully on the edge of the bed. Ji-hoon's eyes opened and he tried to smile. "Hi," he whispered. "Hi, sweetheart. How are you feeling?" Tired, scared. His hand found hers. "I thought I was going to die." Minji's throat tightened. "But you didn't, you're still here. For now." Ji-hoon's voice was matter-of-fact, too adult for a 10-year-old. "The doctor said my progression is faster than expected. I might not have as much time as they thought." Minji felt like she'd been punched. She looked at Soo-jin, who nodded confirmation. "We're adjusting medications and treatment plans," Soo-jin said quietly. "But yes, his condition is advancing more rapidly than the initial prognosis suggested." After Soo-jin left to prepare medication, Ji-hoon squeezed Minji's hand. "I'm not scared of dying." "Not really. I'm scared of not having lived enough first." "Then we'll make sure you live," Minji said fiercely. "Every single day. We'll squeeze as much life as possible into whatever time there is. Promise?" "Promise." Jae-sung appeared in the doorway. He looked destroyed, like he'd aged 10 years overnight. When Ji-hoon fell back asleep, he and Minji went to the study. "The doctors want to increase his medical supervision," Jae-sung said, his voice hollow. "More restrictions, more careful monitoring. They're talking about reducing physical activity again." "No," Minji said immediately. "Minji, no. I understand they're trying to protect him, but we're not going back to that. Not when he's finally living. What if he gets worse because we're pushing too hard? What if he gets worse anyway, but at least he had joy first?" Minji stood up, pacing. "Jae-sung, we both know how this ends. The question is what happens between now and then." Jae-sung put his face in his hands. "I don't know if I'm strong enough to watch this." Minji sat beside him and did something she'd never done before. She put her hand on his shoulder, offering human comfort rather than professional distance. "You don't have to be strong alone," she said quietly. "That's why I'm here." He looked up at her, and the expression in his eyes made her breath catch. It was gratitude and trust and something deeper she didn't want to name. "Thank you," he whispered. They sat like that for a long moment before Minji pulled back, remembering boundaries. Ji-hoon recovered from the episode over the next few days, but something had shifted. Everyone knew time was more limited than they'd hoped. Minji made a decision. She called Hee-won and asked her to watch Soo-ah for a weekend. Then she approached Jae-sung with a plan. "We're taking Ji-hoon on a trip, a real trip." "Where?" "The coast. There's a small town 3 hours away with a beach that's accessible and quiet. We'll rent a house for 2 nights. Just us, Ji-hoon and Soo-ah. The medical staff, Soo-jin, can come if you want. But Jae-sung, he needs this. He needs to feel like a normal kid doing normal kid things." Jae-sung agreed, and 2 weeks later they made the trip. The beach house was small and cozy, nothing like the estate. Ji-hoon loved it immediately. They spent the first day on the beach, building sandcastles and collecting shells. Ji-hoon used his wheelchair on the sand, and he didn't complain once. That evening they cooked dinner together. Real cooking, not having staff prepare everything. Ji-hoon helped make rice balls, his hands clumsy but determined. They ate on the porch watching the sunset. "This is the best day of my life," Ji-hoon said suddenly. "Really?" Jae-sung asked, his voice thick. "Yes, because it feels real. Not like being sick, not like being careful. Just like being a kid with family." Soo-ah leaned against Ji-hoon's shoulder. "We are family." Minji looked at Jae-sung and saw tears in his eyes. She felt her own eyes burning. That night after the children were asleep, Minji and Jae-sung sat on the porch listening to the waves. "I've been thinking," Jae-sung said, "about what happens after." Minji's heart clenched. "After?" "After Ji-hoon is gone. I can't imagine this house without him. I can't imagine going back to how things were before you came. Jae-sung, I know this is complicated. I know there are boundaries. But I need you to know that you and Soo-ah have become family to us." "To me?" He turned to look at her. "When the time comes, I don't want you to disappear. I want you to stay." "As what?" Minji asked quietly. "I don't know yet, but as something more than just an employee." The moment hung between them, full of possibility and danger. "Let's focus on now," Minji finally said, "on giving Ji-hoon the best possible present. We'll figure out the future when we get there." The rest of the weekend was perfect. They took long walks on the beach. They flew kites that kept crashing. They laughed until their stomachs hurt. They took photos that captured joy rather than sickness. On the drive home, both children fell asleep in the back seat. Jae-sung drove while Minji navigated. "Thank you for pushing for this," he said. "Young-hee will have a fit when she hears we took him out of the city. But I don't care." "Good. She doesn't get to decide how Ji-hoon spends his time. Actually, there's something I need to tell you about Young-hee." Jae-sung's voice turned serious. "She's filed a formal complaint with the family trust. She's trying to have me removed as Ji-hoon's primary guardian, claiming I'm being negligent by employing you." Minji felt cold. "Can she do that?" "She can try. There will be a hearing next month. A judge will evaluate Ji-hoon's care and determine if changes need to be made. I'll quit. I'll walk away right now if it helps." "No." Jae-sung's voice was firm. "We're not letting her win. We have months of documentation showing Ji-hoon's improvement. Medical records showing he's healthier, happier, more engaged. We'll fight this." The hearing came faster than expected. Minji sat in a conference room with lawyers, doctors, and family members. Young-hee presented her case with cold efficiency. The investigators' photos showed Minji and Jae-sung sitting together, sometimes in what could be interpreted as intimate proximity. They showed the children playing roughly. They showed trips and activities that could be framed as dangerous. Then it was their turn. Soo-jin testified about Ji-hoon's improved vital signs and better medication compliance. Young Soo talked about increased physical strength and endurance. The tutors discussed enhanced learning and engagement. Ji-hoon himself was brought in to speak with the judge privately. When he emerged, he looked at Minji with fierce determination. The judge took 2 weeks to make a decision. During those 2 weeks, Minji barely slept. She continued working with Ji-hoon, But anxiety shadowed every moment. What if she was removed? What if she never saw him again? What if young Hee won? Finally, the decision came. The judge ruled in Jae-sung's favor. The evidence showed that Ji-hoon's quality of life had improved dramatically under the current care arrangement. There was no negligence, no impropriety, no grounds for removal. Young Hee was ordered to cease harassment and surveillance. When Jae-sung called to tell Minji the news, she broke down crying in her apartment. Relief and joy and exhaustion all poured out at once. That evening, they had a celebration dinner at the estate. Small and quiet, just the family. Because that's what they'd become. A family built not by blood, but by choice and love and shared experience. After dinner, Jae-sung asked to speak with Minji privately. They went to the study and he pulled out a folder. "I have something for you," he said. "A proposal." Minji opened it carefully. Inside was a contract for a new position. Not Ji-hoon's caregiver, but director of family support for a new foundation. "What is this?" "It's something I've been working on for months. A foundation in So Young's name. We'll provide support to families caring for children with terminal or chronic illnesses. Financial assistance, respite care, counseling, resources." Jae-sung's eyes were bright with purpose. "You showed me that money alone doesn't solve these problems. Families need comprehensive support, and I want you to help build that. But Ji-hoon will still be your priority. This is a long-term vision, something that extends beyond." He couldn't finish the sentence. "Something that helps other families the way you've helped us." Minji stared at the contract. It wasn't just a job, it was a legacy. "Why me?" "Because you understand. You've lived it from both sides, the struggling parent and the person with resources. You know what actually helps." Jae-sung leaned forward. "You changed my son's life with a single meal and genuine kindness. Imagine what we could do for hundreds of families." Minji thought about all the time she'd sat in that diner, exhausted and hopeless, all the families like hers barely surviving. And she thought about Ji-hoon, who'd taught her that time wasn't measured in quantity but in quality. "Yes," she said. "I'll do it." They shook hands, but this time it felt different. Like partners, like equals. 6 months later, the foundation launched. The first community center opened in Minji's old neighborhood, in a building that had once been her diner. It offered free meals, childcare, counseling, and resources for struggling families. At the opening ceremony, Minji stood at the podium with Jae-sung beside her. Ji-hoon sat in the front row in his wheelchair, Sua holding his hand. He looked tired but proud. "This foundation exists because of one simple truth," Minji said to the gathered crowd. "Kindness matters. A single act of compassion can ripple outward in ways we never imagine. When I fed a hungry child outside a diner, I had no idea it would lead here. But that's the thing about kindness. You never know what it might become." She looked at Ji-hoon, who gave her a thumbs up. "We're here to support families facing impossible situations, to remind them they're not alone, to provide practical help and emotional support, because everyone deserves dignity, hope, and the chance to squeeze joy from whatever time they have." The applause was warm and genuine. After the ceremony, families lined up to learn about services. Minji watched parents who looked just like she had a year ago, exhausted and desperate, finding hope in the information packets. That evening, back at the estate, they had a quiet celebration. Ji-hoon was exhausted from the day but happy. "We did it," he said to Minji. "We're helping people." "We are, and we'll keep helping people. Even after I'm gone?" The question was direct, like everything about Ji-hoon. Minji didn't flinch from it, especially then. "You're part of this foundation's heart. Your story, your courage, your joy. It'll help other families find their way." Ji-hoon nodded, satisfied. "Good. Then it's not wasted." "What's not wasted?" "The time, the sickness, all of it. If it helps other people, then it meant something." Minji hugged him gently. This child, 10 years old and facing death, had more wisdom than most people found in a lifetime. Later, after Ji-hoon was asleep, Min-ji and Jae-sung sat in the garden. The koi pond reflected moonlight, peaceful and eternal. "However long we have," Jae-sung said quietly, "thank you for making it beautiful. You did that too. You chose to let him live instead of just survive. We did it together." They sat in comfortable silence, two people who'd found each other through tragedy and built something meaningful from it. Min-ji thought about the journey from that moment at the diner to this moment in the garden. A year ago, she'd been a tired waitress with no prospects. Now she was building a foundation that would help thousands of families, and she'd done it by simply being kind. That's what she would tell Sua someday, when her daughter was old enough to understand. That you never know what a single act of compassion might grow into. That kindness isn't weakness, it's strength. That helping others is how you help yourself. The foundation grew over the following months. More centers opened, more families found support. The work was hard but fulfilling. Ji-hoon continued his routines, good days and bad days mixed together. He saw the ocean twice more. He attended Sua's school performance. He read hundreds of books. He smiled thousands of times. He lived. And when the end finally came, 2 years after that first meeting at the diner, it came peacefully. Surrounded by love, by family, by people who'd made his short life meaningful. At his memorial service, Min-ji spoke again, about courage and joy and making every moment count. About a boy who taught her that time isn't measured in years but in experiences. About how his legacy would continue through the foundation, helping families find hope in dark times. Young Hee attended the service. Afterward, she approached Min-ji. "I was wrong about you," she said quietly. "I thought you were taking advantage, but you loved him, really loved him." "I did. I do. He was happy at the end. That's what So Young would have wanted." Young Hee's voice cracked. "Thank you for giving him that." The foundation became Min-ji's life's work. Sua grew up volunteering there, learning her mother's lessons about compassion and service. Jae-sung channeled his grief into expanding the organization, creating programs in 5 cities. And every year, on the anniversary of that first meeting at the diner, Min-ji bought a meal for someone who needed it. A simple act of kindness, rippling forward into the world. Because that's what she'd learned. That love multiplies when you give it away. That helping others creates chains of compassion that extend far beyond what you can see. That a single meal, given freely and with genuine care, can change everything. For everyone.